This week, let's take a walk down the aisle, the political aisle, that is, and see where we might find some common ground. Perhaps there's a uniting factor, something that both sides hold in the highest esteem, that they can't live without, that drives their decisions and shapes their every step. Next up, the boat for peace in a place of war. Women's Boat to Gaza calls for peace and highlights the role of women in the Palestinian struggle for freedom. And finally, it's berry season, so why not celebrate by avoiding these capitalist cronies peddling sweet fruit and bitter discontent? But first, politics and poetry. Politics and poetry, a patriotic prose. Dissenting lines that feed the mind. Pull up a chair, let's dine. Let's dive into the tangled webs, tango on till we learn the steps. Let's fall into the misery, wrap ourselves in mystery. Let's rise from ashes, burned out passions. Raise your fists, revived. The fight that will always survive. The red thread curls in these our times. No, we won't walk their line. Quite contrary, we defy the deified, the vile. The shoddy sons, deficient ones, the tongues that click like guns, shooting lies that aim for minds and bodies of the 99. No friends among these kings, the hope that glows like halos round their crowns, like thirsty souls in deserts hope that water might be found, but biting sand to hope for drops as shaking hands with sold-out sops. Let go of this mirage. Take cover from the sly barrage. Shift your view to see anew the people's cause. Take pause. Pull up a chair, let's dine. Dissenting lines that feed the mind, politics and poetry, a patriotic prose, a tangled web of isms, schisms, jagged edges, tango on and find your rhythm. The past does cast clearly in this light, where we have been the wrong made right, the highs and lows of our fight. There is no time like the present, so let us not be tied or hold too tightly to the dreams of old. Our charge is not to live as if a political atom marked our fate, and here we are arrived just too late to change the ways our lives are made. No, this is our blank slate, scratched and grooved by past made moves, but no less open to our hope. And here is where we mark our minds. Our fate is drawn in present time. Mix a go with the now we hold, tango on in steps we own. Dance in streets, on rooftops. Lean back and scream, take this tangled web, the depths of where we've been, dive in. Then raise your fist revived, the fight that'll always survive, the now that is our time. Politics and poetry, a patriotic prose. Dissenting lines that feed the mind. Pull up a chair, let's dine. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. As we inch closer to the conventions this month, I'd like to take a look at a uniting factor between Democrats and Republicans. That singular aspect that shortens the chasm across the aisle. The things that make these two, in the end, just one party. One two-headed monstrosity sitting atop a pile of corpses, corruption, and corroded conviction. Money. And at this point, it's pretty much common knowledge that both parties have huge corporate donors. Some progressives try to slough off the guilt of being bought by pointing fingers at the Koch brothers, while conveniently ignoring the likes of George Soros, for example. Others will say, well, yeah, the Democrats do get money from millionaires and billionaires, but, that's how the system is built. We have to. And besides, the Democrats get money from the nice billionaires. Oh, I wish that were true, my bonny blue friends. But sadly, past that bright blue veneer is some murky fucking water filled with corporate cash that comes from the very same coffers that help fund the Republican races. Let me show you what I mean. And largely, it is true that individuals, for the most part, do tend to give money to either one party or the other, as evidenced by this chart put together by the Center for Responsive Politics. However, when we look at companies and organizations, the demarcation of conservative versus so-called liberals blurs significantly. Not a lot of zeros popping up like there were in that individual chart. In fact, if you look at some of the companies, it's almost an outright tie. like AT&T, for example, or Goldman Sachs, or Citigroup. Another graph, also by the Center for Responsive Politics, shows this double dipping in an even more obvious way. Microsoft, GE, Lockheed Martin, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, Time Warner, Comcast, Boeing, Pfizer, on and on and on and on. Oh, and spoiler alert, all of these companies are assholes. The "we don't take money from horrible people" argument clearly doesn't hold water here. The companies listed here are like a who's who of who's fucking us over. Whether that be perpetual war, the surveillance state, the sick care system, income inequality, or just the plain and simple overarching oligarchical plutocratic bullshit that hangs over everything. These corporations are steering our country into disaster after disaster like a homicidal masochist driving an MRAP. They don't care what side of the aisle politicians are sitting on. To them, Congress is just a giant pit of opportunity where everyone can be bought. And actually, for the most part, that's true. In almost 100% of congressional races, the winner outspent their opponent, which in turn explains why 96% of Congress won re-election despite having an approval rating of 11 goddamn percent. And that might sound shocking, but I'm actually most shocked by that 11%. Who the hell are these people? It's like the 7 in 10 women who have an unfavorable view of Trump. Well, yeah, no shit. But who the actual fuck are the other 3 in 10 women? Were you just going around to padded rooms, or did you ask a few women in the Amazonian tribes, as yet untouched by civilization, what they thought of some guy named Trump? Those mind-boggling minority margins aside, the bottom line is that there is but one bottom line. It's red, it's blue, and it's actually really quite white. The Democrat versus Republican partition is essentially this picture. We're on the bench thinking, oh, what a beautiful day. Sun is shining. I'm with my party, my one and only, who'd never betray me, never sell me out, never go against what's best for me. And then one day, you find out that they're fracking half the country, laying pipeline coast to coast, spying on you even though they said they wouldn't, and killing random people that they said were stalking you, but who totally weren't. They chose this guy to be the DNC host committee chair, the guy who felt confident that Trump would lose because all the quote-unquote ugly women wouldn't vote for him. And he's pretty sure that the U.S. has more ugly women than attractive ones. Yeah, he said that. But hey, what's a little misogyny between loved ones, right? Rendell is an upstanding Democratic superdelegate. He's a paid consultant for fracking industry equity firm Element Partners. He's the co-chair of the group Fix the Debt, which advocates for slashing Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in order to balance the budget. And in 2011, he gave paid speeches on behalf of MEK, an Iranian exile group that was at the time listed as a terrorist organization. But hey, at least he's a Democrat. Or how about the host committee's finance chair, Daniel Hilferty? Danny Boy is the CEO of Independence Blue Cross and the chairman of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association of America, essentially the lobbying wing of Blue Cross. Oh, and he's on the board of directors for America's Health Insurance Plan, who lobbied hard against the Affordable Care Act and is currently bankrolling several Republican bills to slice and dice the ACA. Hilferty has also personally donated quite a bit of money to the quote-unquote other side. As reported in The Intercept, Hilferty gave $10,000 to Prosperity for Pennsylvania, a super PAC supporting the re-election of Senator Pat Toomey, Republican, $1,000 to the PAC supporting Senator Orrin Hatch, also Republican, $1,000 to Senator Tim Scott, Republican, $2,700 to Chris Christie's presidential campaign, $25,000 to the NRCC, a GOP committee designed to re-elect House Republicans, $2,700 to Jeb Bush, and Hilferty also gave $27,000 to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Minor note. And before you gasp at the thought of a Republican darling throwing wads of cash in Clinton's direction, also consider this. Corey Shockey, a Republican who worked for the National Security Council and the State Department under President George W. Bush, has thrown her weight behind Clinton. And as reported by Politico last week, Brent Scowcroft, who served as National Security Advisor under President George H.W. Bush, announced last Wednesday that he is also backing Clinton, while fellow foreign policy realist Richard Armitage, George W. Bush's Deputy Secretary of State, told Politico earlier this month that he too would vote for the former Secretary of State over Trump. And yeah, you can definitely chalk a lot of this up to the fact that many Republicans find Trump absolutely disgusting, which so does everyone else, but for different reasons. As Andrew Weinstein, Deputy Press Secretary for Newt Gingrich, wrote in the Wall Street Journal, "Look at the policy records of Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Trump, and you'd be hard-pressed to tell who's the Republican." Weinstein finds Trump too liberal on several issues and calls him out for having a quote-unquote conservatism of convenience stance in order to appeal to right-wing voters, which, interestingly enough, is exactly the same point put forward on the flip side with regards to Hillary Clinton. And Clinton has actually gotten a lot of shit for being more flip-floppy than a pair of Birkenstocks, or in fact, not just flip-floppy, but simply Republican. Blogger Russ Belville had this to say about Hillary in a Huffington Post op-ed earlier this year. If Donald Trump wins the presidency over Hillary Clinton, it's not the fault of people like me who won't vote for Republicans. It's the fault of the Democratic Party for nominating a Republican. For me, the horror of a 4-year Trump term is less frightening than cementing in the far-right, center-right corporate duopoly in American politics created since Hillary's husband sold out Democratic principles on welfare, crime, race, labor, trade, drugs, and media. Belville goes on to offer up 25 reasons as to why he wouldn't vote for a Republican, citing 25 things that Hillary Clinton also supports, like wars in the Middle East, fracking, Wall Street deregulation, a tawdry minimum wage hike, ramping up the surveillance state, racism, anti-immigration policies, the war on drugs, and so on and so forth. And even just outside the presidential race, several of these stances were echoed in the recent Democratic Party platform vote in St. Louis. About a week and a half ago, the DNC Platform Drafting Committee voted down proposals to oppose the TPP, ban fracking, call out the Israeli occupation of Palestine, push single-payer health care, raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and support a carbon tax. Furthermore, in the climate arena, Bill McKibben, founder of 350.org and one of Bernie's delegates, reported that besides voting down a ban on fracking and a carbon tax, the committee also voted down, quote, an effort to keep fossil fuels in the ground, at least on federal land, a measure to mandate that federal agencies weigh the climate impact of their decisions, even a plan to keep fossil fuel companies from taking private land by eminent domain. And can I just point out that these proposals are pretty toothless to begin with? I mean, what the hell does an effort to keep fossil fuels in the ground actually mean? Like, you send a guy out there to try and convince the oil company to not drill a chain link fence? Or weigh the climate impact? What the fuck is that vague shit? Well, we did weigh the climate impact and found that, we don't give a shit. But yeah, we actually thought about it really hard. But before I cast too many aspersions, let me just also point out that the committee did agree on a resolution for more bike paths. Now that is what I call some sensible fucking policy. Ultimately, despite the smooth move on the bike paths, the decisions that came out of this committee only further support the monetary and policy evidence that yes, Democrats and Republicans are the same animal, fueled by shifty funds that in turn fuel the policies that benefit the few and fuck over the rest. Which, yes, that does sound pretty damn bleak, but only if you feel that there are no alternatives to the status quo. And to believe that is to just give up. As I said in today's spoken word, dive in to the tangled web, tango on and create your own steps. Don't let the political past chain you to a shitty future. Yes, the Democrats take money because the system is that way, but why the fuck does it have to be that way? Why just accept that the party supposedly charged with representing our interests gets its capital from the same machine that works against our interests at every turn? Why just blindly accept the lesser of two evils as if that weren't also evil? The longer we cower in the face of evil, the longer evil will be our master. The longer we accept the system because that's just the way it is, the worse it will continue to get. Don't drown in this avalanche of lip service lies and lesser evils. The only thing standing in the way of progress is the very same thing that stands in the way of utter disaster. Us. If we stand up, they will fall. If we sit down, we will get trampled by the well-oiled machine that is our capitalist, oligarchical, plutocratic, kleptocratic, trigger-happy, greedy system. As Pericles said, just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics won't take an interest in you. And I think that quote of the day is a damn fine way to round out this segment. So now that we've talked about monopolies disguised as duopolies, let's talk boats. Well, one particular type of boat, a women's boat, to Gaza. Part of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, the Women's Boat to Gaza is an all-women expedition that has sailed and plans to sail again to Gaza in order to raise awareness for the humanitarian crisis and Israeli occupation. Recently, I spoke with Women's Boat to Gaza spokesperson Wendy Goldsmith about the upcoming trip and the ship's mission of peace in a land of war. Take a look.
So the goal is very simple. It's to end the illegal blockade of Gaza, which has been going on for 10 years. And the flotilla, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, has been sending boats to Gaza since 2010, and we can intend to continue doing so until the blockade is lifted. So that's really the bottom line of what our mission's about.
And do you try to get supplies through and things like that, or is it more of like to bring international attention?
We do carry aid on our boats because it's important to recognize the fact that people living in Gaza can't receive or send things in and out of Gaza, so they need lots of stuff. We've just heard recently that certain building materials are not going to be allowed into Gaza to be able to rebuild whatever has been destroyed by the Israeli military. So we do bring humanitarian aid with us, but that's not our primary goal. We're not a humanitarian mission. Our goal is to raise awareness, as you said, make sure that people know the complicity of our governments in terms of how they're supporting Israeli policy, and to end the blockade, which is illegal under humanitarian law. Sorry.
So describe, because a lot of people don't have a geographical view of Gaza. So describe a little bit of the geography, because it's bordered on one side by ocean, and you guys can't, there's a certain barrier in those waters where people can take boats. Describe the geography a little bit.
So Gaza is a small strip of land. I can't remember the size of it, but it's very small. 1.8 million people live there. Over 800,000, I believe, are people under the age of 20. So it's a very young population. It's bordered by Israel and Egypt. So and then the sea. And so Israel and Egypt both blocked borders on many occasions. And the fishermen who try to make a living fishing have been blocked by Israel from going more than 3 kilometers into the sea. And so whatever they can fish has been overfished, and so that's the problem. And so Israel is violating international law by not allowing these fishermen to be able to fish further than that. And so we want to connect through this one border. There's lots of other great initiatives that are occurring that are challenging Israel by land, and so this is our way to challenge them by sea.
So before I get into what kind of interaction you've had on the water, I want to touch upon the women's aspect of it, because it sounds like the Women's Boat to Gaza was inspired by women in Palestine that are fighting for freedom. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's been a really exciting part of this project and what brought it together, because we recognize that there's such an incredibly strong women and feminine voice that needed to be heard and expressed, and that women are really so much of the backbone of picking up the pieces in their daily life in Gaza. I read that the UN report says that Gaza will be uninhabitable by 2020, which is like 4 years from now. Can you imagine that? I mean, imagine what it would be like trying to raise a family in situations like that, where there's no water, there's no electricity, there's no schools. You're living in rubble that's not being able to be rebuilt because no supplies can get in. It's quite devastating. And I, as a mother and also as a woman, felt that it was really important for us to speak out and show solidarity with women who are living in the world's biggest open air prison and don't have often the opportunity to have their voices heard. So one of the most awesome things about this project has been connecting with women in Gaza and West Bank, all of Palestine, to including the diaspora, and to connect ourselves. And that the voices of women are very strong. So we're excited about what we can do and say to the world with this project.
So going back to the experience on the boat, talk a little bit about so where do you set out from, and talk a little bit about the journey, and then what is it like when you get to that line between, the free world, so to speak, and Gaza?
So what we're going to do this time is we're leaving in mid-September, and we're going to leave from a port in the Mediterranean. Hasn't been announced yet where it will be, but we're going to make several stops, and the point of that is to allow people who can't come on the last stretch to Gaza to be able to still participate and show their solidarity and support with our project, and also to visit ports where we can connect women's organizations and other supporting organizations, and celebrate what we're doing, as well as raise awareness and share information, etc. So we're going to do that for about 10 days or something. And then we're going to head to Gaza with the goal of being there October 1st. History tells us that it's likely that the Israeli Navy will board us, will stop us and board us in international waters, which is illegal, and they will use force and possibly confiscate our boat and imprison us. I mean, those are all possibilities, and that's what history has shown. However, this time, with the support of all of the people that we have around the world, we're really hoping that we're going to actually make it to the shores of Gaza.
What has been your interaction with Israeli, or the Freedom Flotilla, or the Women's Boat to Gaza, with the Israeli forces? And do you think that because there is international attention that they'll start backing off of boarding ships and arresting people? Or do you think that there's just this blatant, I don't care, obviously we don't care, otherwise we wouldn't have this open air prison? What's the temperature of that, do you feel?
Well, I want to start by saying that every mission, and this is our fourth, the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, this is our fourth mission, every single one has been peaceful, nonviolent, with the intention of person to person breaking this illegal blockade. So that's, again, how we start out with our organizing. That's the understanding of every single coalition. And so I think that we expect that our governments eventually are going to support us in what we continue to say year after year after year. And if not, we will continue to say it as citizens and civilians who believe in justice.
And what kind of response, if any, because I know it's also not easy for people inside of Gaza to interact with the outside world, what sort of response, if any, have you gotten from people, or in particular women inside of Gaza?
Women are very excited. The women that I'm in contact with, and the number is growing. Like every day I'm getting a new contact from somebody, and they're very excited to be able to tell their stories. So on our website, for example, there's lots of videos from women living in Gaza who can talk about the struggles that they experience on a daily basis, and their commitment to the resistance. That is something that we want to highlight, women to women, and the fact that women are taking these empowered roles in their lives and are speaking out and are connecting. Like that's the beauty in my mind about being a woman is we have this ability to find these connections and to use the power through those connections. So that's what's been most exciting to me about working with women in Gaza and West Bank about this project, is to say, like, it's time for us to women, to take a stand and to really speak out. And there's no shortage of women in Gaza who are doing that.
For more information on the Women's Boat and the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, go to freedomflotilla.org. And real quick, before we wrap up this week's episode, if you're anywhere near Burlington, Washington on Monday, July 11th, join Familias Unidas por la Justicia, FUJ, in their Action, 4 Years of Struggle, March for a Fair Contract. FUJ formed as a coalition of farm workers and their supporters in an effort to stop, quote, systemic wage theft, poverty wages, hostile working conditions, and unattainable production standards. Already, FUJ has rattled the thrones of berry giant Driscoll's, and their Boycott Driscoll's campaign has garnered attention and support around the country and indeed the continent. Last March, 80,000 farm workers who pick berries for Driscoll's and San Quintin, Mexico, went on strike, formed a union, and endorsed the boycott. A Boycott Driscoll's West Coast tour earlier this year ended with the formation of 20 new boycott committees, bringing the total number to 40 committees nationwide, all working together to continue and build the boycott until workers' demands are met. As of the end of the tour, FUJ leadership once again asked to meet with management in order to negotiate a union contract, and were turned away. So, fuck them. To learn more about this ongoing battle, visit boycottsacoomaberries.com, and if you can, join their march in Burlington, Washington. But wherever you are, boycott Driscoll's in support of workers' rights. And that, revolutionaries, will do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for watching. Please do spread and share this with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. Check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in this week's show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube from this oppressively hot and humid devil's den. I guess that makes sense. Good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, donate at Occupy.com/donate. If you'd like to donate directly to Act Out, visit Patreon.com/actout.